Well, good afternoon, everybody. I'm glad to see so many people here today. Now, let me ask you a question. How many of you remember going home to visit with your grandparents?
Yep.
And maybe spending the summer with your grandparents? And I know you're grandparents already. So do you end up having your grandkids coming over and they spend the summer with you, or they're traveling from out of state and they come and stay with you?
Unfortunately, not that long.
Yeah, and I know, being new grandparents, we know that's gonna come a day. Because I know in our long run, we wanna move away from Denver, where both our grandkids are. And our goal is to live on the beach. So we know we're gonna have the grandkids come to us, and hopefully for the whole summer. So now, when I grew up, my dad was in the military, so we lived all over the place. I think the longest I ever stayed in one place was 1.5 years. So we were up and moving all the time. Now, both my mother and my father were both born and raised in Houston, Texas. So when I was growing up, I would always spend my summers at my grandmother's house back in Houston. So no matter where I was, I would get on the plane, because as soon as school was out, I was gone. I was like, I'm out of here, gotta go, and I want to go back and see my relatives in Houston. And I grew up with a good cousin of mine, and a lot of times stayed over at his house with my aunt. But this particular summer in 1972, I stayed with my grandmother, and I was about 14 years old. And my grandmother was sitting there watching a football game. And I could hear it in the other room. And she said, Mikey. I'm like, yes. She said, come here, I want you to see this. I'm like, all right. She said, I want you to sit here and watch. This game would be, and it was Grambling State University versus Florida A&M Rattlers. I had never heard of them, didn't know anything about them, but she wanted me to watch the game. And I'm like, all right, I love football, so why the heck not? I will sit there and watch the game with my grandmother, spend some time with her. Well, while we was watching the game, almost before halftime, she kind of leaned over to me. She said, boy, just wait till you see what the halftime is going to bring. And I'm like, okay, what is that going to be, you know? I didn't know. I thought maybe somebody famous was coming on. Had no idea. So we just sit there and watch the game. But came halftime, there was just a big excitement you could see in the stadium. People were, you know, coming back. You know, usually at a halftime we have people going out to the concession stands and buying popcorn, going to the bathroom, whatever they have to do. Well, at a black college, it was really just the opposite. The game was secondary. Marching band was first. And when I got there, or when we were sitting there, all of a sudden the announcer says, ladies and gentlemen, coming to you right now in a way that you have never seen before, marching at a cadence of 180 steps per minute. They are known around the world as the G-Band, the band that never gets tired, the band that is the fastest, high-steppingest band in all the land. Ladies and gentlemen, Grambling State University Marching Band. And all of a sudden, here's this guy that's coming in with this great big hat on his head, and he's just marching. I mean, he's marching hard, and he's marching with his legs wide open and high, and he comes out and he jumps. And I'm not going to do this, but he jumps down into the splits. And he gets back up, and he stands there, puts his whistle in his mouth. He leans way back. And I mean, when I say way back, he was leaning so far back, the top of his hat was hitting the ground. Don't know how he did that. He's a little bit more flexible than I am. And he just sit there for a minute, then he rolls back up, got to an attention, threw up his baton, blew his whistle, and all of a sudden all the marching band was just coming out. And they were just marching. And they were just marching. And it was such a beautiful sight. I had never seen anything like that. So after that halftime show, I knew I wanted to go to Grambling and be a part of the baddest band in all of the land. That was my goal. That's where I wanted to be. And when I got there, starting in boot camp, and yes, they had band boot camp, we was always consistently told that there would be no half-stepping when it came to our music and when it came to our marching. To make sure that that happened, we had a gentleman, and you heard about him when he came out on the field. That's the drum major. The drum major is the leader of a band. He is the person that gets all the band members out on the rehearsal field in the right formation and ready for rehearsal. He's also the one that sets the discipline, the bearing, and the conduct that he's going to allow on his field. And he is also supposed to give lessons to the band members that don't know how to march. So he was the leader of the band. Now, a lot of what I've learned as a parent has really come from leader of the bands. And I'm sure a lot of what you learn as being a parent has come from either your own parents, your grandparents, your aunts, your uncles, your neighbors. We all learn things by watching others and what we've been taught by observing what other people are doing. So when you're looking at yourself as a parent, a lot of that is coming from what you have learned and what was instilled in you as a parent. So here are 5 easy steps, to being a great parent. The one step is know what your rules are and what they mean to you and to your child. Because, you set a rule and we're like, yeah, that's fine. Yeah, you can't do this and that and the other, but it also puts some limitations on you. And we forget about that. We're like, well, I'm just going to punish him or her, and that's going to be it, and that's the way it's going to be. Well, if you say, well, you can't go here and you can't go there, and we don't want you to do this, and then you say, well, we want to go to the movies. Mom, Dad, you told me I couldn't go to the movies, and I'm too young to stay at home. So now you have to stay at home. You can't go to the movies either. So you have put the limitations on yourself. So know your rules, know what they mean to you and to someone else, because it's going to affect you. Now, number 4, know what kind of child that you want to raise. If you want a child that says, yes ma'am, no ma'am, that is free, and we heard the speaker just before us, Dale giving you a category of how kids fit in and their different personalities. So know what kind of child, and I'm not talking about know what kind of child you want them to be. Like, I want my child to be a dentist, and I want my child to be an attorney, I want my child to be a judge. No. Because if you want your child to be happy, you want your child to do whatever it is they enjoy, not you. Because it's not about you. This is their life. You're just there to help guide them through it. Make sure that they don't trip over too many things that you've already tripped over. To make sure that they are headed in the direction that they want to go and help guide them through that. So you want to know what kind of child or what you want your child to be. So number 3, listen to your child. And this one I think is so important, and we heard it, Dale, you said it. We've heard, Doug, Dale, they both have said it already. You want to listen to your child. When you want to punish your child, a lot of times we're just mouthing. You don't do this, you don't do that, you need to do this, and you need to do that, and you did this, so now I want you to do that. But sometimes we need to just sit and listen. Find out what's going on. Why did they do certain things? And what happened in their day? Because when your kid comes home, and Doug, you mentioned it, your son, when he comes home, he wants to run to you and he tells you everything that happens. But if you're one of those parents that say, yeah, whatever, I'm steadily working, doing whatever I gotta do, that's not gonna work. Sooner or later, that child is gonna look at you and say, you know what, ain't no need me talking to him because he's not listening. So I'm just gonna go and do what I gotta do. So when they have a real problem, they're not coming to you and you're wondering why. Well, you didn't listen to them in the first place. So just spend a little time listening and give them your undivided attention. You don't want to just say, yeah, okay, yeah, really. No, get into a little conversation with them. Listen to them. That's some quality time that you're going to be spending with your child. That's great quality time. Time you're not going to get back. I remember when my kid was, my son, because between my wife and I, we have 6. So, but when my son, who is now 16, I remember when he was born, you know, they always say that when a baby is feeding, when the mother's feeding the baby, whether it's breastfeeding or bottle feeding, you know, that's their bonding time. So I wanted to make sure I had some bonding time with my son. This is my son, you know, this is the loin of my generation and my body and my family. I want to bond with my son. So I would actually give him his last bottle every night, and I would sit there and rock him to sleep and give him his bottle. And that was my time every single day until he told me to stop. And that broke my heart. I loved doing that. I had a great time. And then he was like, no, Dad, no, that's enough of that. I don't know if he was 6, 7, or 8, but it just really broke my heart because I loved doing that. So you have to listen. And another thing that I find, and I'm going to use this number 3, is, well, actually number 2, is parenting with an open mind. Because we sometimes get stuck in what we've learned, what we have been instilled in us as parents, and how to parent, because of the examples that we have received. But I'm telling you, open your mind. Because what worked with your son over here, if you have a daughter, it's not going to work. You have another son, might not work. We heard earlier, all kids are different. So you cannot parent them the same way. Because even though they came from your loins, they're totally different from you. So you like, wow, you know, they're not listening to me, they're not like me, wow, I really wish they were like me, and that would be so much easier. But you gotta just parent with an open mind. My son told me once that I remember at the Aurora Mall, shopping. And I don't know what we were shopping for, but he ticked me off. And this was when he was about 13 years old. And it really just made me mad. And I just said, you know what, let's go. And we got in the car, and the argument just kept going. And we started raising our voices. The voices getting higher and higher. And my son just stopped for a second. He said, you know what, Dad? If you don't holler, I don't holler. And I had to sit back and think for a second. I'm like, here's my 13-year-old telling me how to parent. I don't know if I like that, but he's right. And he's telling you, I don't want to argue. I don't like to argue. So, he's 16 now. We have never had another argument like that. And even when he was a little baby, I'm a disciplinarian. I grew up with spankings, and I don't think they're wrong. I don't say they're right. It just depends on how you do it. So don't condemn me yet. But I grew up spanking my child. Now, my son was one of those childs that you could spank. Literally, I would spank him, and he'd just look at me like, that it? That's all you got? And then you just want to draw back your hand and go, yeah, I got something for you, but I can't do that. So what I learned is to just have a conversation with him. And we'll sit down and talk. And we'll get to the meat of the problem. And those tears will just start flowing. But hollering and screaming at him doesn't work. Spanking doesn't work. But talking to him works. Now my daughter, different story. When I came to discipline her, it was take this away. Now all my kids and myself used to go to bed with music. So, you know with girls, they always like their phones. You know, it's glued to the ear. Now I have a stepdaughter that can care less about a phone. We'd be hollering at her because she doesn't have it. You're like, well, where's your phone? I don't know. She's 15 years old. Care less about a phone. So with my daughter, I knew that when she did something wrong, I could take her phone away or I could take her music away. Now my son is altogether different. My son is one of those that you can take the Game Boy away, he's like, okay. You can take the phone away, you'd be like, okay. You can take everything away, TV away, okay, don't matter. He just go get a book. I can't take a book away. So I have to leave it. It's frustrating because it's like, all right, how am I going to discipline this child if I can't take anything away from it that's going to punish you? So what I had to learn was, use my noggin. Okay, I want you to read this book, and I want you to write a report from this book. And I wanted so many pages, and I wanted outline and everything else. He didn't really like that. Bullseye. That's what I wanted to hear. But it also gave him knowledge, because the books that I have him to read were not just your everyday books and the books he liked. It was more of self-help books. And it really helped him. He's a very intelligent kid anyway. So I really enjoyed learning from him. And I really had to know I had to be flexible. I had to be different. I couldn't do the same thing my mother did with me. It was different. My dad did something different. My mom used to say my dad used to hang us up upside down and spank us on the butt. I don't remember none of that. I have no recollection of that whatsoever. But I'm sure he probably did. So, but the last and the number one thing I think parents really ought to know is mean what you say and say what you mean. That is the number one thing. And there's another one, but that one I think is number one. Because really, when you say something to your child, you have to mean it. If you say, I'm going to pull this car over and spank your behind if you don't stop, you need to mean it. And when you don't do it, then the child, when the next time you say it, the child will be like, yeah, damn, I'm just going to keep on doing what I'm doing. Why? She never pulled it over. So I just keep on going. You cried wolf so many times that I don't believe you. You have to mean what you say and say what you mean. If you say, I'm going to take this away from you, take it away. If you say, I want you to have A's and B's, and you come home with a C, you're in trouble. They're in trouble. Now, you don't always have to tell them what that trouble might be, the consequences of coming home with a C. You can always keep them guessing on that, so they have no idea what trouble they might get into by coming home with a C. Or what trouble they might get into if they got caught stealing. Or what trouble they might get into if they talk to their teacher bad. But you have to make sure that you are going to give them some consequences and you mean what you say. So always think before you open your mouth. Don't speak out of anger. And learn to control your temper. Because I know, I got a bad temper. But I always made sure that when I told my kids something, that I meant it. And I had to follow through. So if I don't want to follow through with something, like if you really don't like spanking, and you said, you know, if you keep that up, Joey, I'm going to spank your behind. And you really don't like spanking, don't say it. Say, Joey, if you keep that up, I'm going to send you to your room. That's easy. Send them to the room. But mean what you say. So the bottom line here is there is no such thing as a perfect parent. I want everybody to understand that. We're not perfect people. That's just human nature. We're not going to be perfect. We're not perfect. But we just try to be the best that we can be as people, as parents. So knowing that you're going to make mistakes, and that is just part of it. Being a parent, though, means being flexible. Being a parent means being fast on your feet, marching to a cadence of 180 steps per minute if you need to. As a parent myself, and like I stated earlier, we have 6 kids from the age of 23 to 15. And they're all good kids. We all have some problems with these kids, but we love them to death. But as that, if I know if I need to march in front of my kids to make sure there's no harm come to them, I'm going to do that. If I need to march in front of my kids and stand and stop, stand in place, or maybe even take a step backwards so they can catch up with me, I'm going to do that too. I'm going to march past the time when the soles of my shoes have worn away. Like a drum major, being a parent means being flexible, leading them onto the field of life. And I want to make sure when my kids get on that field that they have everything they need to make it in this world today. That's my job as a parent, and I take that very seriously. I want to make sure that when my kid gets out there in that world that they don't forget what mom and dad have taught them. I want to make sure that they are the best, that they have everything they need to do and accomplish what they want to accomplish. So, but sooner or later, there's going to come a time when I'm going to have to step aside and let my kids go on by, out into the world, so they can enjoy their own lives. And when that time comes, I think I'm going to do a little dance and say, hey, go ahead. I'm happy for you. I'll be glad to see what you can accomplish in your world. And I know once that I have done all that I can do to make them the best child that they can be, the best adult that they can be, then I know I have done a great job and I have marched to a greatness as a parent. Thank you.